Welcome to Learn the Word, the daily Bible teaching program of Calvary Chapel of Delta, and Pastor Doug McLean. Proverbs 31 is a famous passage for its description of the virtuous woman. But as we'll see today, it's so much more than that. Here's Pastor Doug to explain in the message, The Pursuit.
Proverbs 31 verse 1 begins this way: the words of King Lemuel, the utterance which his mother taught him. What, my son? And what, son of my womb? And what, son of my vows? Lemuel means unto God or for God. That's the definition of his name. Some believe that this is the name that Bathsheba called her son Solomon. Many scholars actually believe that. Back in Proverbs chapter 1 and verse 8, Solomon wrote, Proverbs 1 verse 8, "My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law of your mother." And so here we have it, the law of your mother. These are the words of a mother to her son, spoken to this one who came from her womb, spoken to this one that she labored to bring into this world, and then labored to raise. And it seems in reading this that she had a vow concerning this son. Notice that. She called him son of my vows, maybe like Hannah in 1 Samuel 1:11, who made a vow that, Lord, if you give me a son, I'll give him to you. 1 Samuel 1:11. So she made some commitment, some vow to the Lord that concerning her son that she wanted to see fulfilled. Now, if this was Bathsheba, it would make sense that she and David would commit that son to the Lord, making a vow concerning him because of the way that their first son passed away. So here, for his good and for the Lord's glory, out of love for her son, she had invested so much of her life into him. He had become king, and out of her commitment to the Lord, she spoke to him, expressing her good intentions toward him, her love for him. Now, just a simple reminder, when your mother speaks to you, remember, she has good intentions for you. I mean, she carried you in her womb. She brought you into the world. She's done so much for you that you should give a lot of weight to what your mom says. She's not just some lady. Now, in this case, it seems like she's saying to her son, "What are you doing?" It's as if he had begun to make some wrong decisions and was beginning to head down the wrong path. And as we go on, you'll see this confirmed. For she said to him there in verse 3, "Do not give your strength to women, nor your ways to that which destroys kings." So this mother is telling Lemuel, her son, don't use all your energy chasing after women. Don't live for women. Don't give yourself over to living, seeking to satisfy your lust, your desire. She knew that a man could make big mistakes in that area of lust and sexual temptation. And if it was Bathsheba speaking to her son, to Solomon, she saw firsthand the hurt, the pain, the problems that came from David's lust. David was never the same after his adultery. Now, Deuteronomy 17:17 commanded Israel that when they desired a king, when they put a king in place, he was not to multiply wives unto himself. Deuteronomy 17:17. And And there Moses said for the Lord, lest his heart turn away. Do not multiply wives for himself, lest his heart turn away. And tragically, that's exactly what happened to Solomon. And here, his mother was seeing that develop in him. We don't know how old he was at this time, but maybe he had this infatuation with little girls, and he's probably a little bit older, maybe a teenager, starting to chase after girls. And his mom says, "What, my son? Don't give your strength to women. What are you doing?" And he didn't listen. And so 1 Kings chapter 11 tells us that Solomon loved many women, and he ended up with 700 wives, 300 concubines. And 1 Kings chapter 11 verse 4 says that his wives turned his heart after other gods. 1 Kings 11:4. So he gave away his strength, and it destroyed him in many ways. It destroyed him spiritually. And he's not the only one. It destroyed Samson. We know that. He gave away his strength to Delilah, literally. And many men have followed that course and given up so much because they spend all their energy and their focus on pursuing a woman or women, and aren't satisfied with the one that God has given them. It's that a selfish desire the pursuit of that desire will destroy what you already have. So wisely, Lemuel's mother said, "Don't do it. It's not cute. It's not something to encourage. It's not something to live for. It's not something to live in pursuit of. There are better ways to spend your strength." And she continued in verse 4. She said, "It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes intoxicating drink, lest they drink and forget the law and pervert the justice of all the afflicted." So kings, rulers need to have a clear head, to have the ability to give solid judgment, to not be impaired by being under the influence of alcohol. Because, alcohol impairs judgment. And it can interfere with sound decision making. It's interesting, Leviticus chapter 10 and verse 9, after Nadab and Abihu failed, the Lord gave that instruction concerning priests. Leviticus 10:9, that they were not to drink wine or intoxicating drink when they were serving in the tabernacle. Leviticus 10:10 says the reason they were not to drink is because they needed to be able to distinguish between the holy and the unholy and the clean and the unclean. Leviticus 10:10. So same lesson. The priest, the king, they both needed to have a clear head and not be under the influence of alcohol. And this carries over to 1 Timothy chapter 3 and Titus chapter 1 for church leaders. Church leaders are not to be given to wine. 1 Timothy 3:3, Titus 1:7. 1 Timothy 3:3 and Titus 1:7. So if you want to be a pastor, you want to be an overseer of a church, if you want to be used of the Lord to your maximum potential, you need to have a clear mind. You need to be able to make sound judgments to be able to help others, unimpaired by alcohol. If you just think about it, if a pastor is out having a couple drinks and then he gets a call that somebody's in crisis, you wouldn't want a pastor showing up at the hospital or a counseling crisis with alcohol in his breath. To be under the influence and not be able to give sound judgment, wise counsel. I mean, you wouldn't want your surgeon, if you were going to have surgery, you wouldn't say to your surgeon, "Hey, why don't you have a few shots of whiskey before you open me up? It'll help you relax a little bit." You wouldn't say that to your airline pilot, "Have a few drinks before we take off. I know it's stressful flying a plane. I'll just help you relax a little bit. You wouldn't do that. And how much more important is spiritual ministry? Besides, Ephesians 5:18 says this, "And do not be drunk with wine, in which is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit." Do not be drunk with wine, but be filled with the Spirit. And it's written in such a way that you choose. If you're drunk with wine, you're not filled with the Spirit. You can't be both. So you choose, you're either going to live under the influence of the Holy Spirit, who gives peace and joy and increased discernment and self-control, or you're going to, if you choose, live being a drunk and being inebriated, living for temporary pleasure and then ending up making foolish, regrettable decisions and miss many opportunities to serve the Lord. So, for kings, they needed to be sober to be good kings, to fulfill their responsibility, to remember his laws, to ensure that justice was given for all. So, apparently, if you look at this in the context, this means that Lemuel must have been showing some signs that he was chasing women and being tempted to hang out with his buddies that were drinking, and his mom saying, "What are you doing?" And she continued by letting him know what is the purpose of alcohol. In her view, the purpose of alcohol, verse 6, "Give strong drink to him who is perishing, and wine to those who are of bitter heart. Let him drink and forget his poverty and remember his misery no more." So she said, look, there's a purpose and design for alcohol. It's a medication for the dying and the dismal, for those dealing with pain who are about to die, and for those who are despondent. By the way, to be bitter of heart here is to be dealing with intense mental distress. And alcohol can bring some temporary relief from pain, a distraction from your true condition. But notice, it's not a solution. But in that day, being under the influence of alcohol, there is a potential temporary escape from the pain. But it's not a solution. Paul wrote to Timothy in 1 Timothy 5:23, he said, "No longer drink only water, but use a little wine for your stomach's sake and your frequent infirmities." So similarly, a prescription. He said, there must have been something in the water where Timothy was there in Ephesus causing him to be sick often. We don't know, but Paul said, don't drink, use a little wine. He's speaking of it like a prescription. Use a little wine for your frequent infirmities. So listen, it doesn't have anything to do with recreation, but rather from her prescription here, it's for someone who's sick, who's not well, who's not able to function already, who's dealing with unbearable conditions. And she says, look, this is what it's for. And by the way, living now, Jesus said that we can ask the Father and he'll give the Holy Spirit to any that ask. Much better solution. Now, by taking this medication, it's clear in the context that you'd be in a condition unable to truly serve or fulfill your responsibilities or embrace the opportunities to serve in the things that are set before you. So strong drink and wine would not make a person better. That's not in the text at all. They'd just be able to forget their misery for some time, their need. They'd have some temporary relief. Now, here's what the king should have been doing instead of chasing women and drinking. Verse 8, "Open your mouth for the speechless and the cause of all who are appointed to die. Open your mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and needy. So this is the king's position, his responsibility given to him to maintain justice and equity and righteousness in their society. His role was, as Romans 13 says, to come against evildoers, to hold back wickedness, as he was supposed to be God's minister to the people for their good, having been given authority on earth to execute wrath on him who practices evil. That's what Romans 13, 1-4 tells us. So there's a purpose for government in God's plan. Romans 13, 1-4. Now the king in Israel, according to Deuteronomy 17, 18-20, was actually, when he became king, to hand copy the law. To take the copy of the law from the presence of the Lord and actually hand copy it so that he could have a copy of the book to keep with him. And in Deuteronomy 17, 18-20, it explains that that whole process would help him stay submitted to the Lord, and it would enable him to make wise judgments for the Lord, to hand copy it and then keep it with him. So here, the king's mom reminds him of what is his duty as the king. And the Holy Spirit, through the king's mom, said, you're to use your voice for those that don't have a voice. And for those who are appointed to die, those the world would kill, who are expendable to the world, use your voice, use your mouth, use your influence, use your position to make right decisions and to advocate for those that have nothing or have needs. Now, of course, I don't think I'm speaking to any kings here. No kings with us tonight, right? But each of you do have an influence, and each of you have a voice. Because there are people who don't. I mean, obvious in looking at this, there are babies in the womb that can't speak for themselves, and they're in great jeopardy. When you look at this passage, the Lord really applied it to my heart concerning abortion years ago. Because there are many, many that are appointed to die and don't have a voice. And we can and we should open our mouth for them and advocate for them. It kind of shocked me. I was reading an article on, forgive me for this, NPR today. But I thought, hey, this is a liberal source, so for this topic, it's probably more accurate. But NPR article from March 19, 2024 says that there were over 1 million abortions last year in America. And that's the highest amount in a decade. That means even after Roe v. Wade has been turned over, there's more babies being killed right now than there has been in 10 years. So we have a voice, and we should use it relationally, certainly. Whenever we have an opportunity to speak about the topic, we should have relationships in our community with people around us so that we can speak truth into people's lives. And we should use our voice to speak up regarding the issue and to also even speak and use our influence to support candidates that will protect the unborn and care about the poor and needy. But you know, the best use of our voice is to share the gospel. Because the biggest changes about life issues happen when people are born again and they start to see the value of a human life. So again, above all things, we need to be sharing the gospel. Now, in ancient Israel, Mama here laid out the king's job. Now, in verse 10, Lemuel's mother continued to speak to him about finding a wife. So this is a mother telling her son what to look for in a wife. This is not some chauvinist male telling his son. This is this man's mother telling her son what the ideal wife would look like. Look at verse 10. Who can find a virtuous wife, for her worth is far above rubies? So she begins by using this word virtuous, and the core meaning of the word is strength, force, valor, or power. It can be used to describe somebody that actually has influence. So if somebody's strong, they have influence. If someone has some force, that's certainly influence. If they have valor, there's a willingness to use their influence. If they have power, they have influence. So it can be used for somebody that has influence, that is strong in various ways. It's very clear here that as we look at the text, that she's describing a woman who has strength, particularly in her moral character. Hence, that's why the translators use the word virtuous, that she has virtue that gives her influence or power. Very capable woman with great abilities, tremendous strengths, but tremendous influence in her character. This was used of Ruth in Ruth chapter 3, verse 11, when Boaz was speaking to her, Ruth 3:11, to Ruth, he said, "All the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman." So Lemuel's mother said to him, look, finding this virtuous woman is rare and therefore of great value, far above rubies, far above any earthly wealth you could pursue. He's telling her this is a treasure worth seeking. Now, what's interesting, what you don't see in the English, is from here, beginning with this verse all the way to the end, 22 verses are written as an acrostic. That means that there's a progression in the Hebrew alphabet where each letter in the progression of the alphabet is represented by each stanza in the rest of this proverb. So we would, in English, the first would start with A, the second would start with B, C, on through to the end. So this is an acrostic, 22 letters, Hebrew letters, in a progression moving through their alphabet. So you could say this is the A to Z wife. This is the complete wife. This is the comprehensive description of what you'd want to have as a wife. And of course, it could have been written like this so that he could memorize it, but it carries the sense of completion. This is the complete wife that you would want to find, who is worth far more above rubies. Verse 11, she says, the heart of her husband safely trusts her, so he will have no lack of gain. Now, her husband is mentioned specifically 3 times here in verse 11, verse 23, and verse 28. And it begins by saying that her husband can trust her implicitly, that he has full confidence in her, and not primarily because of her abilities and intellect, but rather because of her loyalty to him, her heart for him, that her intentions for him, for his well-being, for his good. She has good intentions for him. She's looking out for his interest. She's a woman that would never undermine him, and he never has to suspect her. He never has to doubt her. She's just completely loyal to him. This is a woman that he can trust. And notice the way she's described is it's in verse 12, it says, she does him good and not evil. Notice all the days of his life. So she's not sporadic. It's not occasional. She's not fickle. She's not temperamental, but there's this continued pattern that can be observed. And by the way, it has to be observed over time. To establish any of these things, there has to be some time to evaluate it. So look, if a husband can't trust his wife, or a husband isn't sure that his wife has good intentions for him, it will be detrimental from the get-go for him and for his marriage.
That's all the time we have for today, but we're going to continue to look at this description of the Proverbs 31 woman next time and see the beautiful lesson it teaches about Christ and the church. So be sure to join us. In the meantime, if you have any questions about today's program, or you'd like to let us know how this program has ministered to you, you can write to us at 5911 Delta Road, Delta, PA 17314. That's 5911 Delta Road, Delta, PA 17314. So thanks for joining us today. We're so blessed to be a part of your pursuit to learn the Word.